Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight's journey takes us into the murky world of pirates. Outlaws of the sea who once struck fear into sailors and challenged entire empires. They flew black flags, fought gruesome battles, and built floating societies that lived by their own rules. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted only a few decades, but in that time it left behind stories of daring raids, hidden treasure, and legendary captains like Blackbeard, Bonny, and Mary Read. In this video, we'll explore 100 fascinating facts about pirates. Some will confirm the stories you know, while others will reveal truths that are stranger than fiction. If you enjoy these voyages into history, be sure to like and subscribe for more, or simply share your favorite fact down in the comments. But for now, you don't need to do anything. Just settle in, relax, and let these stories of pirates inspire you. Let's begin. The Golden Age of Piracy was surprisingly short. When most people think of pirates, they imagine a sweeping age of centuries filled with treasure, battles, and black flags. In truth, the so-called Golden Age of Piracy lasted only a few decades in the early 18th century. It began after the Great Wars of Europe ended, when thousands of sailors suddenly found themselves unemployed but still skilled at sea. Many turned to piracy as both survival and opportunity. For a short time, pirates became powerful enough to challenge even the greatest navies of their age. But this period did not last. By the mid-1820s, most famous pirate havens had been destroyed and their fleets captured. The brevity of this era only makes its impact more striking, for in such a short span, piracy captured the imagination of the world and left behind a legend far larger than its actual timeline. Pirates once prowled nearly every ocean on the planet. Though the Caribbean is most closely associated with pirates, their reach extended far beyond tropical waters. Pirates operated in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and even the icy northern seas. Merchant ships carried goods across all corners of the world, and wherever there was trade, there was temptation. Pirate raids reached as far as the coasts of Africa, the bustling ports of Asia, and the Mediterranean where corsairs hunted. Some even threatened the shores of northern Europe. This global presence meant that piracy was not merely a local nuisance, but a truly international challenge. Empires struggled to protect their shipping routes, and navies stretched themselves thin across distant oceans. The image of pirates as strictly Caribbean outlaws is popular in fiction, but history shows they once prowled nearly every sea lane of the world, making oceans far more dangerous than they appear today. The Jolly Roger was only one of many terrifying pirate flags. The skull and crossbones, known as the Jolly Roger, is instantly recognizable today, but it was not the only symbol flown by pirates. Captains often created their own flags to strike fear into their enemies. Some displayed skeletons wielding weapons, while others showed bleeding hearts, hourglasses, or even entire scenes of death and judgment. The goal was intimidation. A ship seeing such a flag would often surrender without resistance, knowing the alternative could be brutal. Red flags signaled no quarter, meaning no mercy would be given. Black flags suggested that surrender might save lives. Each design was a psychological weapon, as powerful as any cannon. These flags were often handmade and unique, stitched together from scraps and painted with bold, simple imagery. The Jolly Roger may be the best remembered, but in truth, pirate banners came in many frightening forms meant to haunt the seas. Pirate captains could be chosen or overthrown by a crew's vote. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of naval or merchant ships, pirate crews often operated with a surprising degree of democracy. Captains were chosen by the vote of the crew, and their authority lasted only as long as they commanded respect and confidence. A captain who failed to deliver plunder, mistreated his men, or showed cowardice could be removed just as easily as he was elected. In some cases, crews voted in stormy debates on deck, with every pirate given a voice in the decision. This practice was not just symbolic, it reflected the need for trust and cooperation in a dangerous life. A ship was more than wood and sails. It was a fragile society afloat. Pirate democracy was not perfect, but compared to the harsh discipline of navies and merchant companies, it gave sailors an unusual sense of control over their fate at sea. Many pirates split their loot more evenly than kings shared taxes. On land, wealth flowed upward to monarchs and nobles, leaving ordinary people with little reward for their labor. At sea, pirates followed a different model. Plunder was divided according to pre-agreed shares, often recorded in a ship's code. Captains usually took extra portions, as did skilled sailors like carpenters or gunners. But the difference was far less extreme than the gulf between rich and poor in most kingdoms. Ordinary crew members could expect a fair cut, and this fairness was one of the main attractions of piracy. For men accustomed to low pay and harsh treatment on merchant or naval ships, the promise of equal rewards was irresistible. This system made pirates dangerous, not just because of their weapons, but because they offered an alternative to the rigid social order of their time. On pirate decks, wealth was divided with surprising equality. Pirate codes laid down rules for life and death at sea. Many pirate crews followed written codes of conduct, sometimes called articles. These documents outlined the rules of life aboard the ship, from how plunder would be shared to how disputes were settled. They even set punishments for breaking the rules, ranging from loss of shares to more severe penalties. The codes also addressed practical matters, such as keeping weapons ready for battle and maintaining discipline during raids. Some codes banned gambling on board or promised compensation to injured crew members. Far from being lawless, pirates created their own laws to maintain order in their floating societies. These rules gave structure to lives lived outside the reach of nations, and they helped maintain cooperation in the chaos of battle and plunder. Pirate codes reveal that behind the myth of wild freedom was a surprising level of organization and governance at sea. Blackbeard staged battles with burning fuses woven into his beard. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, earned his terrifying reputation as much through theater as through combat. Before battles, he tied slow-burning fuses into his thick black beard and lit them so that smoke and sparks poured from his face. The sight must have been horrifying, making him appear like a figure from nightmare. Blackbeard also carried multiple pistols, knives, and swords strapped across his chest, presenting himself as unstoppable. His flag showed a skeleton spearing a bleeding heart, adding to his aura of fear. While Blackbeard was a skilled commander, much of his success came from this psychological warfare. Many opponents surrendered at the mere sight of him, rather than risk a fight. His legend remains one of the most vivid in pirate history, and his use of fire and smoke ensured his image burned itself into memory. Bonny fought openly as one of the most feared pirates of her time. Bonny was born in Ireland, but became one of the most infamous pirates of the Caribbean. Unlike many women who disguised themselves to join ships, she fought openly, often alongside her partner Calico Jack Rackham. Accounts describe her as fiery, fearless, and unwilling to back down from combat. She defied the expectations of her time by carving her own path in a world dominated by men. When her ship was finally captured, it was said that she fought more fiercely than many of the crew, refusing to surrender until the very end. Her courage and defiance made her a figure of fascination, both then and now. While much of her life remains wrapped in legend, Bonny's presence on the pirate stage proved that the world of piracy could make room for those bold enough to seize it. Mary Read, lived years disguised as a man among pirate crews. Mary Read's story is one of disguise, survival, and courage. From a young age, she dressed as a boy to secure opportunities denied to women. She served in the army, then at sea, and eventually joined a pirate crew still in disguise. It was only after forming a bond with Bonny that her secret became widely known. Despite her hidden identity, Mary proved herself as a fierce fighter, respected by those around her. She lived through adventures that blurred the line between fact and legend. But what remains certain is her ability to thrive in a dangerous world by defying expectations. Mary Read's life reveals how pirates could sometimes look beyond convention, valuing skill and loyalty over appearance. Her story endures as one of the most remarkable examples of individuality and determination in the history of piracy. Pirates often spared ships that surrendered without a fight. Contrary to the image of merciless slaughter, many pirates preferred to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. A ship that surrendered quickly could be plundered with little risk to either side. Pirates valued their health and their crew's strength, knowing that every battle carried the chance of wounds or death. This practical approach also served as reputation management. If word spread that surrender meant survival, future victims would be more likely to yield without resistance. Of course, the opposite was also true. Ships that resisted could be shown no mercy. But most pirates were not reckless destroyers. They sought wealth, not wanton violence. Sparing lives when possible was not an act of kindness so much as a calculated choice that made piracy more efficient. This fact adds nuance to the image of pirates, showing them as ruthless yet pragmatic in their pursuit of plunder. Buried treasure is mostly a myth. Pirates rarely hid their plunder. The classic image of a pirate burying gold on a deserted island comes more from fiction than reality. In truth, most pirates spent their loot quickly in port cities filled with taverns, gambling dens, and markets. Hiding treasure was risky. A shipwreck, a rival crew, or even the passage of time could erase all memory of the location. There are a few stories of buried hoards, such as the legend of Captain Kidd, but historians believe these were rare exceptions. Pirates were not long-term investors. Their lives were too uncertain and dangerous for careful savings. Instead, they used their spoils for immediate enjoyment, living for the moment rather than planning for the future. The myth of buried treasure survived because it is such an exciting idea. But in practice, pirates preferred to spend their wealth rather than bury it. Many pirates spent their wealth in days at taverns and ports. When a pirate crew returned from a successful voyage, the sudden wealth in their pockets often vanished as quickly as it was gained. Taverns near ports became scenes of wild celebration, where rum and ale flowed freely. Gambling tables, street performers, and merchants selling luxuries drained coins faster than any sea battle. Pirates lived dangerous lives, with little certainty that they would survive their next raid. For many, it made sense to spend their shares immediately on food, drink, clothing, and fleeting pleasures. The result was that few pirates ever became wealthy in the long run. Some returned to Seabrook within weeks, seeking another prize to plunder. This cycle of feast and famine gave piracy its reckless rhythm, one in which fortune was enjoyed in the moment and tomorrow was left to chance. The Caribbean became a playground and battleground for pirates. The Caribbean Sea was at the heart of the Golden Age of Piracy. Its warm waters were filled with merchant ships carrying sugar, tobacco, spices, and gold from the New World back to Europe. The region's countless islands, coves, and reefs provided perfect hiding places for pirate ships waiting to strike. At the same time, powerful European empires fought for dominance, and their wars spilled across the waves. In this chaos, pirates thrived. Some ports welcomed them, trading goods and providing safe refuge in exchange for stolen riches. Others became battlegrounds where navies clashed with pirate fleets. The Caribbean offered opportunity, wealth, and danger in equal measure. It was here that many of the most famous pirate legends were born, shaping the image of piracy that still lives in stories today. Tortuga grew into a pirate stronghold, buzzing with life. The island of Tortuga, off the coast of what is now Haiti, became one of the most notorious pirate havens in the 17th century. Originally settled by French hunters, it quickly attracted buccaneers and freebooters who transformed it into a bustling outpost. Taverns, markets, and brothels thrived, fueled by the constant flow of stolen goods. Ships could be repaired, resupplied, or sold, and new recruits were always available. For pirates, Tortuga was both refuge and opportunity, a place where the law of empires had little reach. European powers tried repeatedly to control it, but the island's spirit of independence and profit proved hard to stamp out. The name Tortuga became legendary, a symbol of the wild freedom and danger of the pirate life. Even today, it remains one of the most famous places associated with piracy. Nassau became a pirate republic that defied empires. On the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, the town of Nassau became one of the most extraordinary pirate strongholds of the early 18th century. For a time, it was described as a true republic of pirates, a place where crews of every origin gathered and lived with astonishing independence. Merchant ships feared the sight of Nassau's harbor, where pirate fleets rested before striking out again. Without a strong government presence, the town flourished on trade, plunder, and lawless freedom. It was here that famous captains like Blackbeard and Calico Jack once anchored. Eventually, the British Crown cracked down, sending governors and warships to bring Nassau back under control. Yet during its brief, chaotic reign, Nassau stood as perhaps the closest thing to a pirate nation, where the black flag flew higher than the banners of kings. Some pirates were government-backed privateers with legal licenses to plunder. Not every pirate was technically outside the law. Some carried official documents called letters of marque, which gave them permission from a government to raid enemy ships during wartime. These men were known as privateers. They captured ships, plundered goods, and disrupted rival nations, all while enjoying legal protection from their sponsors. However, the line between privateer and pirate was thin. When wars ended, many privateers found themselves without employment. Some continued raiding without permission, effectively becoming pirates overnight. To the crews being attacked, the difference mattered little. Privateers like Sir Francis Drake were celebrated as heroes at home, even as they were feared abroad as pirates. This murky distinction shows how piracy was often tied to politics and power, not just rebellion and greed. Sir Francis Drake blurred the line between pirate and hero. Sir Francis Drake, an English sailor of the 16th century, was both admired and feared. To the Spanish, he was a ruthless pirate who raided their ships and colonies. To the English, he was a national hero who expanded trade, brought back riches, and helped challenge the might of Spain. Drake circumnavigated the globe, commanded fleets, and became one of the most famous privateers in history. His exploits show how piracy and patriotism could be two sides of the same coin, depending on perspective. Spain saw him as a criminal, England knighted him for his service. This dual reputation captures the complicated role of piracy in history, where one nation's outlaw might be another nation's champion. Craig's life stands as a reminder that the line between pirate and hero could shift as easily as the tides. Explorers and pirates sometimes looked almost the same. In the age of sail, explorers and pirates were not always easy to tell apart. Both set out across unknown seas. Both carried weapons for defense, and both sometimes engaged in violence to achieve their goals. Ships seeking trade and discovery could turn to plunder if opportunity arose, and pirates often justified their raids as exploration of new territories. In fact, many sailors moved between roles, serving as explorers, merchants, privateers, or pirates depending on circumstance. The uniforms, tools, and even maps they used were nearly identical. What separated them most was intent, whether they sailed under a crown's banner or the black flag. But in the vast oceans, far from home ports, such distinctions often blurred. For the people they encountered, explorers and pirates could feel frighteningly similar. Shipwrecks have revealed incredible treasures once stolen by pirates. The ocean floor still hides stories of piracy, locked within sunken ships. Archaeologists have discovered wrecks filled with coins, weapons, and cargo once plundered by pirates. These finds provide glimpses into the world of seafaring outlaws, confirming tales long told in books and ballads. Sometimes the treasures are not glittering gold, but humble items like tools, pottery, and everyday objects that reveal the lives of sailors. Each wreck is a time capsule, preserving a moment when fortune turned against a crew. Storms, battles, and betrayal sent countless ships to the depths, and many remain undiscovered. The recovery of these artifacts brings pirate history to life in a way no story alone can. They remind us that the legends of piracy were lived by real people, whose ships still lie scattered across the silent sea. Some pirates carried letters of pardon if they retired in time. When piracy became too disruptive, governments sometimes offered pardons to those who surrendered. A letter of pardon, or amnesty, promised that a pirate could return to ordinary life without punishment, provided he gave up his crimes. Many accepted these offers, weary of constant danger. Others used them as a temporary shield, resuming piracy once the pressure eased. These pardons reveal how empires tried both force and forgiveness to end piracy. For some, it was a chance at a new beginning. For others, it was simply a piece of paper, valuable only until the next raid. The promise of pardon never erased the allure of the sea, and many pirates found it impossible to retire from a life of adventure and plunder. Still, these letters were one of the rare moments when pirates and rulers briefly shook hands instead of crossing swords. Pirate ships often flew false flags to lure victims closer. Pirates were masters of deception as well as combat. One of their cleverest tricks was sailing under false colors. Instead of the black flag, a pirate ship might display the banner of a friendly nation, or even a merchant company. Seeing the familiar flag, a passing vessel might sail closer, thinking it safe to approach. Only at the last moment would the pirates haul down the disguise and raise their true colors. By then, the victim was often too near to escape. This strategy saved pirates from long chases and made their ambushes more effective. False flags were technically illegal, even in warfare, but on the open sea, rules were easy to bend. To an unsuspecting captain, the sight of the familiar flag could mean safety or sudden disaster. The black flag was meant to frighten enemies into surrender. When pirates did raise their black flags, the purpose was clear: fear. A black banner fluttering in the wind signaled the pirates were near and that resistance might be deadly. The flag's designs varied, but the dark background alone was enough to spread dread among sailors. Ships often surrendered without a fight when the black flag appeared, sparing pirates the risk of battle. This efficiency was exactly what pirates wanted. They needed plunder quickly and with minimal losses. For the crew of a targeted ship, surrendering could mean survival, while fighting back might mean destruction. The black flag was therefore less about cruelty than about control. It was a tool that kept bloodshed to a minimum by terrifying enemies into submission before the first shot was fired. Red flags warned that no mercy would be given. Even more frightening than the black flag was the red one. Known as the Bloody Flag, it signaled that pirates intended to show no quarter. In other words, no mercy would be given if a ship resisted. For sailors spotting a red banner on the horizon, the message was chillingly clear: surrender or face annihilation. Few dared to test it. The threat alone often brought swift compliance, making battles unnecessary. While rare, the red flag was part of the pirates' arsenal of psychological warfare, designed to crush resistance before it began. To see it snapping in the wind meant that pirates were not just after cargo, they were prepared to enforce their will with absolute severity. Today, it remains one of the most feared symbols from the pirate world, remembered as a banner of ultimate warning. Some captains designed their own unique symbols of terror. The most famous pirate flags, like the Jolly Roger, were not mass-produced. They were personal creations, stitched together by crew members and painted with bold designs chosen by the captain. Each symbol carried meaning. Skeletons holding spears, hourglasses running out of sand, and bleeding hearts all told victims that their time was short. These images were powerful in an age when superstition and fear of death were strong. Some captains became known by their flags alone, their reputations carried across the seas through rumor. Just as knights once bore coats of arms, pirates used flags to declare their presence and strike fear long before battle began. These designs made the ocean feel haunted by living symbols of doom, each tailored to the captain who commanded them. Many pirate ships were stolen from navies or merchants. Few pirates built their own ships. Instead, they captured them. Merchant vessels were often seized, stripped of their cargo, and converted into pirate ships. Naval ships, if taken, offered even greater prizes with their cannons and reinforced hulls. Once refitted, these captured vessels became the very tools pirates used to continue their raids. In this way, piracy was self-sustaining. A stolen ship could be turned against its former owners, chasing down the same trade routes it once traveled peacefully. This practice also made pirate fleets unpredictable. A ship that once flew the colors of a navy might reappear under the black flag, now carrying an outlaw crew. The seas became a place where any vessel might shift identity, transforming from hunter to hunted in the span of a single capture. Captured ships were often refitted into swift pirate vessels. After seizing a ship, pirates rarely used it exactly as they found it. Crews often made careful changes to maximize speed and power. Extra cannons might be added, heavy cargo stripped away, and the hull cleaned for faster sailing. Pirates favored vessels that were quick and agile, able to chase down prey or escape from warships. Small sloops and schooners were especially prized for their maneuverability, though larger ships could be useful if properly outfitted. Refitting was a practical art, turning ordinary ships into deadly raiders. The process also reflected pirate priorities: survival and efficiency. A ship that could outrun danger or catch a prize was worth far more than one weighed down with unnecessary bulk. Every plank and sail mattered in a life where speed often decided who lived and who perished. The most feared pirate ship of all was Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard's flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, remains one of the most legendary vessels in pirate history. Originally a French slave ship, it was captured and transformed into a fearsome warship under his command. Armed with dozens of cannons and crewed by hundreds of men, it became a floating fortress of intimidation. The very name struck fear into sailors, especially when its black flag was raised alongside Blackbeard's terrifying appearance. For a brief but unforgettable time, Queen Anne's revenge dominated the waters of the Caribbean, blockading ports and capturing countless ships. Its reign ended when it ran aground near North Carolina, but by then, its legend was sealed. Today, its wreck has been explored by archaeologists, and artifacts recovered from the sea floor bring the ghost of this infamous ship back into the light of history. Blackbeard Roberts captured more ships than any other pirate. While Blackbeard may be the most famous, another pirate eclipsed him in sheer success. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, is believed to have captured more than 400 vessels during his career in the early 18th century. His daring raids stretched from the Caribbean to the coast of Africa, making him a truly global pirate. Roberts was known for his skill as a navigator and his strict discipline aboard ship. Unlike some pirates, he enforced order among his crew, which may explain his long string of victories. His death in battle eventually ended his reign, but his record of captures remains unmatched. Black Bart's name may be less well known than Blackbeard's, yet his achievements mark him as one of the most formidable pirates to ever sail the seas. Some pirate crews numbered in the hundreds. Not every pirate ship was a small band of outlaws. At the height of their power, some pirates commanded crews that rivaled small armies. Ships like Queen Anne's Revenge or the fleets of Chinese pirate leaders carried hundreds of sailors, each playing a role in keeping the vessel running. With so many men aboard, pirate ships could overwhelm targets by sheer force. These floating communities required organization, food, water, and discipline to function, making them far more than ragtag groups. At sea, the combined roar of cannons and the rush of hundreds of armed men boarding could break the will of any merchant crew. While not all pirates commanded such numbers, those who did held power that could rival even naval squadrons. Their size alone was enough to terrify those who spotted their sails on the horizon. Life aboard a pirate ship could be both brutal and strangely free. Daily life at sea was harsh, with cramped quarters, scarce food, and constant danger. Yet for many sailors, pirate ships offered freedoms they had never known. Crews shared decisions, loot, and responsibilities more equally than on naval or merchant vessels. Discipline was strict, but it was agreed upon through codes, not imposed by distant officers. Pirates could elect leaders, settle disputes through votes, and enjoy a voice in matters of survival. This sense of agency was rare in an age where most people lived under rigid authority. At the same time, the brutality of storms, battles, and disease hung over every voyage. Freedom and hardship sailed side by side, making pirate life both appealing and perilous. For some, the taste of independence outweighed the risks. For others, the sea eventually claimed its price. Pirates often elected a quartermaster to share power with the captain. On many pirate ships, the captain did not rule alone. Crews often elected a quartermaster, a trusted officer who acted as both manager and balance of power. The quartermaster handled discipline, divided plunder, and represented the crew's interests. In times of battle, the captain held authority, but in daily matters, the quartermaster could even overrule him. This arrangement reflected the unusual democracy of pirate life, where sailors valued fairness and accountability. It prevented captains from becoming tyrants and kept order among men who had chosen freedom at sea. The quartermaster was both judge and treasurer, a position of great respect. This system, rare for the age, gave pirate ships a unique structure that blended leadership with shared power, a contrast to the strict hierarchy of most navies and merchant fleets. Crews punished disobedience with marooning or flogging. Pirates valued freedom, but discipline still had to be enforced. To keep order, crews turned to punishments that were both severe and symbolic. One of the harshest was marooning, abandoning a disobedient pirate on a deserted island, with little more than water and perhaps a pistol. Survival was unlikely, and the threat alone kept many in line. Flogging, or whipping, was another common punishment, used to correct lesser offenses. While such measures sound brutal, they reflected the desperate realities of life at sea. A single act of betrayal, theft, or cowardice could put the entire crew at risk. Pirate codes laid out these punishments in advance, ensuring everyone knew the consequences. Though freedom was prized, survival demanded order, and discipline was the price of holding together a fragile floating community. Walking the plank was more legend than reality. One of the most enduring pirate images is that of walking the plank, a bound prisoner forced to step off a wooden board into the sea. Yet historians believe this was largely a myth, popularized by novels and plays rather than real pirate practice. In reality, pirates had far simpler ways of dealing with captives, such as marooning, execution, or imprisonment. Walking the plank may have happened in isolated cases, but there is little evidence it was common. Its lasting power comes from its drama. The image of a helpless victim surrounded by jeering pirates captured the imagination of storytellers and audiences alike. Today, it remains a symbol of piracy in popular culture, even if its historical reality is doubtful. The plank may not have been real, but the fear it represents was very much alive. Some pirates kept musicians aboard to lift spirits. Life at sea could be monotonous and grueling, with long stretches of boredom between bursts of action. To ease the strain, some pirate crews kept musicians aboard. Fiddlers, drummers, or men who could sing sea shanties helped keep morale alive. Music played during meals, in the evenings, or even in the midst of storms to raise spirits. It was also essential during work, with rhythmic songs guiding the pulling of ropes or the rowing of oars. A good musician could be as valuable as a skilled carpenter, bringing comfort and unity to the crew. The presence of music shows that pirates, though hardened by danger, still sought joy and companionship in sound. On the endless ocean, a tune drifting across the deck could remind them of home, of humanity, and of life beyond plunder and battle. Rum and ale were daily rations at sea. Fresh water was difficult to store for long voyages, often turning foul within weeks. To solve this, pirates, like many sailors, relied on alcohol. Rum and ale were standard rations, mixed with water to create a drink known as grog. The alcohol helped preserve the liquid and provided comfort on harsh days. Rum, in particular, became strongly linked to pirate life, symbolizing both celebration and escape from hardship. Taverns in port towns thrived on the demand, and barrels of spirits were prized cargo. Of course, excessive drinking could lead to disorder, but pirate codes sometimes regulated its use. For better or worse, rum and ale became as much a part of pirate identity as cutlasses and cannons, a reminder of how necessity and indulgence often went hand in hand at sea. Pirate diets included salted meat, ship's biscuit, and stolen goods. Food aboard pirate ships was far from luxurious. Most meals consisted of salted meat, dried peas, and ship's biscuit, a hard, dry bread that could last for months, but often grew infested with weevils. Fresh food was rare and quickly spoiled. To supplement their diet, pirates relied on stolen supplies from captured ships, sometimes feasting on exotic goods like sugar, citrus, or spices. Coastal raids also provided livestock or vegetables. Meals were cooked in large pots over open flames, with everyone eating more or less the same fare. Though monotonous, this food kept crews alive during long voyages. The contrast between grim daily rations and the occasional bounty of stolen luxuries added to the unpredictable rhythm of pirate life, where a feast might follow weeks of hunger on the open sea. Scurvy was a constant threat without fresh fruit. For pirates and all sailors of the age, scurvy was one of the deadliest dangers. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, it led to weakness, bleeding gums, and eventually death if untreated. With little access to fresh fruit or vegetables, long voyages became a gamble with health. Pirates sometimes managed to secure citrus fruits from captured ships or coastal raids, unknowingly treating the disease without understanding its cause. Others suffered terribly, with entire crews weakened. Scurvy was not fully understood until centuries later, when naval explorers discovered the importance of lemons and limes. For pirates, it remained a shadow over every voyage, a silent enemy as dangerous as cannons or storms. The fight against scurvy reminds us how fragile life at sea truly was. Pirates sometimes raided coastal villages for supplies. When provisions ran low, pirates did not always rely on captured ships. They occasionally landed on coastal settlements, seizing livestock, food, and other necessities. These raids could be swift and terrifying, with villagers forced to flee as pirates carried away supplies. Such attacks were risky, as they exposed the pirates to ambushes and retaliation, but the rewards were often too tempting to ignore. Coastal towns in the Caribbean, the Americas, and even parts of Africa lived in fear of sudden pirate landings. These raids showed that piracy was not limited to open waters. It could strike the shore without warning. Though not as famous as sea battles, coastal raids were a vital part of survival for pirates, blending practicality with intimidation in their quest for sustenance. Many pirates were former sailors escaping harsh naval life. A large number of pirates began their lives in the service of navies or merchant fleets. Life under these flags was often grueling, with low pay, strict discipline, and dangerous working conditions. Sailors were sometimes pressed into service against their will, enduring whippings and harsh treatment. When the chance arose, many abandoned this life to join pirate crews. On a pirate ship, they could expect greater equality, larger shares of loot, and a voice in decisions. Though risky, piracy offered freedom and opportunity compared to the rigid structures of official service. The ranks of pirates were filled with these disillusioned sailors, men who traded obedience for rebellion. Their skills made them valuable recruits, and their resentment fueled the defiance that defined piracy's challenge to the great empires. Others were enslaved or forced into piracy. Not all who sailed under the black flag did so by choice. Some were captured during raids and given the stark choice of joining or facing death. Others were enslaved people offered freedom if they agreed to fight alongside their captors. In certain cases, prisoners of war or convicted criminals were pressed into service aboard pirate vessels. While many became loyal crew members, the reality was that piracy was sometimes built on coercion. Life at sea was already harsh for those forced into piracy. It carried an extra layer of desperation. Yet even within this, some found opportunity, carving out new lives in the strange democracy of the pirate world. Their stories remind us that piracy was not always glamorous rebellion. It was sometimes survival under the harshest of conditions. A surprising number of pirates were teenagers. While we often imagine pirates as grizzled old sailors with weathered faces, many were shockingly young. Life at sea often began early, with boys taken aboard ships as apprentices or cabin hands. Some of these youths were swept into piracy when their vessels were captured, while others joined willingly, tempted by the promise of adventure and freedom. In the 18th century, teenage pirates were not unusual, with some as young as 15 or 16 serving in crews. The hardships of seafaring aged them quickly, but their youth gave them energy and boldness in battle. Their stories remind us that piracy was not only the domain of seasoned veterans. For many, it was a path entered at an age when most today would still be in school, facing choices that were as dangerous as they were life-defining. Pirate ships sometimes included women disguised as men. Although pirate crews were overwhelmingly male, history holds several accounts of women disguising themselves to join. Dressed in men's clothing, they worked, fought, and sailed alongside their comrades, often hiding their identities for years. Mary Red herself lived this way for much of her life before revealing the truth. These women defied strict social rules that confined them to limited roles on land. Life aboard a ship was harsh and dangerous, but it offered opportunities unavailable elsewhere. Their disguises were often so convincing that even close crewmates remained unaware. These rare but remarkable figures highlight how the pirate world, for all its brutality, sometimes allowed individuals to carve paths denied to them elsewhere. In a time of rigid expectations, disguised women at sea were extraordinary rebels. Some pirate crews were remarkably diverse in origin and background. Pirate ships often brought together men, and occasionally women, from many different lands. Former slaves, escaped prisoners, unemployed sailors, and adventurers all found places in pirate crews. Unlike naval or merchant vessels, which divided people strictly by nationality or class, pirate ships often valued skill over background. Shared danger created bonds that ignored old boundaries. Some crews included Africans, Europeans, indigenous peoples, and Asians working side by side. This diversity was unusual for the era and reflected the chaotic, global nature of piracy. The black flag united them under one identity, that of pirates. Life aboard was still harsh, but for some, it offered a rare chance at equality, however fleeting, in a world that otherwise denied it. Pirate crews were floating societies unlike any others of their time. Pirates used slang and sea shanties unique to their world. The language of pirates was colorful, filled with slang and phrases shaped by life at sea. Terms like avast, scallywag, and ahoy carried practical meanings that helped coordinate work and battle. Songs, or sea shanties, also played an important role, setting rhythm for hauling ropes or rowing. These chants made hard labor feel lighter and helped crews work in unison. Some songs carried stories of adventures, warnings of danger, or jokes to ease the monotony. For many pirates, music and slang created a sense of identity that set them apart from the rigid discipline of naval ships. The unique culture of words and songs survives today in the popular image of pirates, though often exaggerated. Still, they reflect the real bonds forged through shared hardship and the need to keep spirits high on long voyages. Eye patches were more myth than common gear. The image of a pirate with an eye patch has become iconic, but in reality, few wore them. Sailors did sometimes suffer injuries that cost them an eye, but eye patches were no more common among pirates than among other seafarers. The myth may have grown because an eye patch made for a dramatic and memorable detail in stories and illustrations. Some modern theories suggest eye patches could have been useful for quickly adjusting vision between bright sunlight and the darkness below deck, but evidence for this is thin. In truth, the eye patch is more a creation of fiction than fact. Pirates faced countless dangers, but most did not walk around with a black band across their face. The enduring image remains one of the many ways popular culture has reshaped the reality of piracy. Wooden legs and hooks became famous symbols, but were rare. Another enduring image is that of pirates with wooden legs, hooks for hands, and other dramatic injuries. While some sailors did indeed lose limbs and relied on crude prosthetics, these were not nearly as common as stories suggest. A life at sea carried many risks, and accidents or battles could cost someone an arm or leg. However, such injuries often ended a sailor's career, as the physical demands of piracy were immense. The legend of peg-legged pirates spread largely through novels and plays, where such details made characters more vivid. Over time, the wooden leg and hook became symbols of pirate resilience, even if they were exceptions rather than the rule. They remind us of how imagination has exaggerated real dangers into lasting icons of seafaring life. Pirates often wore stolen fine clothes as trophies. Rather than the ragged rags sometimes shown in fiction, many pirates dressed in surprisingly fine clothing. Raiding merchant ships provided opportunities to seize not only cargo but also clothing, fabrics, and accessories. Pirates often wore these luxurious items as symbols of their success. Silks, embroidered jackets, and fancy hats taken from captured ships gave them a flamboyant appearance. Dressing well was also a form of intimidation, signaling wealth and power to both allies and enemies. Of course, clothing at sea wore out quickly, but while it lasted, stolen finery gave pirates a striking look. The image of flamboyant pirates strutting on deck reflects a kernel of truth, that they enjoyed flaunting the spoils of their dangerous trade. Earrings sometimes served as emergency savings. For pirates, jewelry was not just decoration. Earrings of gold or silver often doubled as portable wealth, easy to carry and difficult to lose. In some cases, sailors wore them as a kind of emergency fund, available to sell or trade in times of need. Superstitions also surrounded earrings, with some believing they could protect eyesight or even pay for a burial if a sailor's body washed ashore. Whether practical or symbolic, earrings were common among seafarers, and pirates embraced the practice. The glint of metal in an ear was more than fashion, it was security. For men who faced storms, battles, and the constant risk of death, carrying a little piece of treasure on their own body made practical sense. Tattoos were common among sailors and pirates alike. Tattoos have long been associated with life at sea, and pirates were no exception. Sailors used ink to mark their skin with symbols of identity, protection, or memory. Anchors, stars, and images of loved ones were common designs. For pirates, tattoos could also be badges of defiance, reminders of past voyages, or marks of belonging to a crew. The practice likely spread through contact with cultures around the world, as sailors often visited distant ports. Tattoos helped pirates express individuality in a world where most wore similar clothes and lived similar lives. They were also permanent, a lasting statement in an unpredictable life. Though not as flamboyant as the legends suggest, tattoos were a very real part of pirate culture and a tradition that continues among sailors today. Pirates relied on brutal boarding battles to seize ships. Though cannons were important, the true climax of pirate combat often came in boarding actions. After chasing down a merchant vessel, pirates would hurl grappling hooks, pulling the ships close enough for their crews to storm aboard. The fighting was swift and chaotic, with pistols, cutlasses, and axes used at close range. The goal was not destruction, but capture. Ships and their cargo were too valuable to sink outright. Once pirates secured the deck, the battle was won. Many merchant crews surrendered quickly rather than face such violence, which is why the sight of the black flag alone could decide a contest. Boarding battles were risky but effective, and they became one of the defining tactics of piracy. The roar of cannons often gave way to the clash of steel in these decisive moments. Cannons were used to disable, not destroy, valuable prizes. Although pirate ships carried cannons, their purpose was not usually to sink enemy vessels. A sunken ship meant lost cargo, and pirates sought plunder, not destruction. Instead, cannons were fired to disable a target, splintering masts, shredding sails, or damaging the rudder. A well-aimed shot could cripple a ship's ability to flee while leaving the valuable cargo intact. The booming sound of cannon fire was often enough to frighten merchant crews into surrender. Sometimes a warning shot across the bow ended the fight before it began. This careful use of firepower showed the pirates' pragmatism. They were outlaws, but they were also businessmen of the sea, seeking profit from captured goods. A single intact prize was worth far more than a dozen ships left at the bottom of the ocean. Grappling hooks dragged ships together in combat. Once a target was close, pirates often turned to grappling hooks, heavy iron claws attached to ropes. These were hurled across the gap between ships, snagging rigging, rails, or masts. Crews then hauled on the ropes, pulling the two vessels together. The moment of impact was critical. Pirates poured across the gap in a rush of close combat. Grappling hooks transformed a chase into a boarding battle where pirates excelled. They were easy to make, reliable in battle, and deadly effective at bringing an enemy ship within reach. For the terrified sailors on a merchant vessel, the sound of hooks clanging onto their deck was the signal that escape was no longer possible. The fight had come to them, and the pirates were about to board. Hand-to-hand combat was often quick and chaotic. When pirates boarded a ship, the fighting that followed was rarely organized or prolonged. Hand-to-hand combat exploded in sudden chaos, with pistols fired at close range and swords clashing in cramped spaces. The goal was not to kill every defender, but to overwhelm them quickly. Pirates relied on speed, aggression, and shock to break resistance. Many merchant crews, untrained for combat, surrendered soon after the first rush. For pirates, the faster the fight ended, the better. Long battles risked casualties and damage to the prize. This meant that while boarding actions were violent, they were often brief. Within minutes, the victors controlled the deck, and the losers were forced to yield. The chaos of these clashes became legendary, but in practice, pirates sought efficiency rather than drawn-out duels. Pistols and cutlasses became iconic pirate weapons. The image of a pirate armed with a pistol and cutlass is rooted in truth. Pistols were small, single-shot firearms ideal for the close quarters of shipboard fighting. Pirates often carried several at once, tucked into belts or bandoliers, ready to fire in quick succession before reloading. The cutlass, a short, broad-bladed sword, was perfect for fighting in the tight, crowded decks of ships. Unlike longer swords, it was easy to swing in close combat. Together, pistols and cutlasses became the standard weapons of many crews. They were simple, effective, and terrifying in a sudden boarding attack. Over time, these tools became the symbols of piracy itself, immortalized in paintings, ballads, and films. They were not just weapons of survival, but also the emblems of a dangerous way of life at sea. Some pirates preferred axes and boarding pikes. Not every pirate favored pistols and cutlasses. Many carried axes, which could serve both as weapons and as tools for breaking through doors, barrels, or ship fittings. Others wielded boarding pikes, long spears designed to thrust at enemies during an assault. These weapons were simple but effective, particularly against crews armed with little more than knives or improvised tools. Axes and pikes had the advantage of being durable and easy to use. In the heat of battle, pirates were practical. They used whatever worked best in the confined spaces of a ship. The choice of weapon often reflected personal preference or what could be stolen from captured vessels. This variety shows that pirate armaments were not standardized, but adapted to the needs and ingenuity of each crew. Naval escorts and convoys were organized to fight piracy. As piracy grew more disruptive, governments sought stronger defenses. Merchant ships began traveling in convoys, protected by armed naval escorts. Saving together offered safety in numbers, and warships could deter or defeat pirate attacks. This strategy mirrored the methods used against raiders throughout history. Unity provided strength. For pirates, attacking a convoy was far riskier than preying on a lone merchant vessel. Naval escorts were trained for battle and carried heavier cannons, making them formidable opponents. The presence of convoys forced pirates to be more cautious, striking only at weaker targets or remote areas. While not foolproof, these measures helped reduce piracy over time, especially once governments committed serious naval resources to the task. The convoy system marked the shift from pirates ruling the seas to navies reclaiming control. Many pirates were eventually hunted down by warships. For all their daring and skill, few pirates enjoyed long careers. As empires expanded their naval power, pirate hunters scoured the seas with fast, heavily armed ships. Pirates, who relied on speed and surprise, often found themselves outmatched in direct confrontations. Warships carried disciplined crews and overwhelming firepower, capable of battering pirate vessels into surrender or sinking them outright. Famous captains like Blackbeard and Black Bart Roberts ultimately met their end in such encounters. These hunts were relentless, as governments saw piracy not only as theft, but as a challenge to their authority. In the end, the superior organization and resources of national navies overwhelmed the scattered fleets of pirates. Their downfall was not sudden, but inevitable, once the full weight of empire was brought against them. Famous pirate hunters became legends in their own right. Just as pirates achieved fame, so too did those who hunted them. Naval officers and privateers tasked with eliminating piracy built reputations that rivaled the outlaws they pursued. Men like Woodes Rogers, the governor of the Bahamas, earned renown for breaking the pirate stronghold at Nassau. Others gained fame for capturing or killing infamous captains. These hunters were celebrated as defenders of order, their victories turned into public spectacles through pamphlets and ballads. For governments, they served as symbols of power and justice, proof that the chaos of piracy could be contained. Their stories remind us that piracy was not only about daring outlaws, but also about the equally determined forces sent to end their reign. Some pirates surrendered in exchange for royal pardons. Not every pirate ended their career at the point of a sword. At times, governments offered amnesty to those willing to give up piracy. Known as royal pardons, these offers promised safety from punishment if pirates surrendered peacefully. Many accepted, weary of constant pursuit and eager for a chance at a normal life. Ports became scenes of mass surrenders, with entire crews laying down arms in exchange for forgiveness. Some kept their word and retired quietly, while others returned to piracy when temptation proved too strong. These pardons were practical for rulers, reducing piracy without endless battles. They also reveal that not all pirates sought death in defiance, some simply wanted survival. The choice to accept a pardon was often a turning point between a life of danger and a fragile chance at peace. Others fought to the death rather than be captured. For some pirates, surrender was unthinkable. They fought to the very end, preferring death in battle to execution on land. Capture often meant public trials, imprisonment, or hanging, fates that many viewed as worse than dying with a weapon in hand. Famous pirates like Blackbeard resisted until their last breath, turning their final moments into part of their legend. Crews inspired by such defiance sometimes chose to go down with their ships rather than yield. This refusal to surrender fed the image of pirates as fearless rebels, unbroken even when faced with overwhelming force. While not every pirate shared this resolve, those who fought to the death became symbols of resistance, their stories retold long after their ships had vanished beneath the waves. Pirates were often tried publicly in coastal cities. When pirates were captured, their trials often became major public events. Courtrooms filled with curious onlookers eager to hear the stories of famous outlaws. The proceedings were carefully documented, with transcripts later published for widespread reading. These trials served not only to judge the individuals involved, but also to send a message. piracy would not be tolerated. Many were held in coastal cities such as London, Boston, and Port Royal, places deeply tied to maritime trade. Captains and crew were questioned about their crimes, their spoils, and their allegiances. For the public, these trials blurred the line between justice and entertainment, offering a glimpse into a shadowy world of adventure and rebellion. The courtrooms became the final stage where pirates' fates were sealed, their legends both confirmed and condemned in front of eager crowds. Executed pirates were displayed as warnings to others. Punishment for piracy went beyond the trial. After execution, the bodies of some pirates were displayed near harbors and along riverbanks as stark warnings to others. These grim spectacles reminded sailors and townsfolk alike of the dangers of choosing the outlaw's path. The displays were intended to strip piracy of any glamour by showing its brutal end. While unsettling by modern standards, in the 17th and 18th centuries, such public messages were common ways of enforcing law. For many, the sight of a pirate hanging against the sky was unforgettable, reinforcing the risks of rebellion against empires. Though piracy still persisted, these warnings contributed to its gradual decline, ensuring that even in death, pirates continued to influence the choices of those who came after them. Some pirate bodies were hung in gibbets along the shore. Perhaps the most chilling of punishments was the gibbet, a metal cage where the body of an executed pirate was suspended for months or even years. Positioned near harbors or along busy shipping routes, these eerie figures loomed as constant reminders of justice. Sailors passing by would see them swaying in the wind, a grim deterrent meant to dissuade anyone from following the same path. The practice was less about cruelty to the individual and more about broadcasting a message of control from governments determined to end piracy. These silent guardians of the shore became infamous symbols, blurring the line between fear and fascination. They remain one of the darker footnotes in the history of piracy, reflecting how far authorities were willing to go to enforce order on the seas. The capture of Blackbeard became a celebrated victory. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was one of the most feared pirates of all time. His capture and death in 1718 at the hands of Lieutenant Robert Maynard became a celebrated event across the British colonies. Accounts describe the dramatic battle off the coast of North Carolina, where Blackbeard fought fiercely before finally falling. His death was seen as the symbolic end of an era, proof that no pirate, however terrifying, was beyond the reach of empire. News of his defeat spread quickly, turning Maynard into a hero and cementing Blackbeard's place in legend. Even in death, the pirate's image grew larger than life, his story retold in ballads, pamphlets, and tavern tales. The celebrated victory over Blackbeard remains one of the most famous moments in the long struggle against piracy. The downfall of Nassau marked the end of pirate rule. For a brief time, Nassau in the Bahamas stood as the closest thing to a pirate republic. It was a haven where crews from many nations gathered, trading plunder and living free from outside control. But its independence could not last. In the early 18th century, Britain sent Governor Woodes Rogers with a fleet of warships to reclaim the island. Pirates were offered pardons or faced destruction. Some accepted, others fled or fought and lost. With Nassau brought under imperial control, one of the last major pirate strongholds vanished. The downfall of Nassau symbolized the larger decline of the Golden Age of Piracy. What had been a thriving outlaw community became just another colonial port, its wild independence replaced by order and rule. Pirate legends spread quickly through pamphlets and newspapers. Even as pirates were hunted down, their stories continued to spread. Pamphlets and newspapers eagerly printed tales of their exploits, blending fact with rumor. These publications reached wide audiences, feeding fascination with the mysterious lives of outlaws on the seas. Some accounts exaggerated their cruelty, while others emphasized their daring escapes and treasures. For readers far from the coast, these stories provided glimpses into an exotic and dangerous world. They also served political purposes, justifying harsh crackdowns by portraying pirates as monsters. Yet at the same time, the very act of publicizing their deeds kept their memory alive. Pirates became as much creatures of print as of the ocean, their reputations shaped by the words that carried them across the world. Some stories exaggerated pirate cruelty for dramatic effect. To terrify readers and justify harsh punishments, many early reports painted pirates as far more brutal than they truly were. Accounts spoke of unimaginable violence, cruelty, and endless atrocities, often stretching the truth to captivate audiences. While pirates could indeed be ruthless, many such stories were amplified to make their downfall appear all the more necessary. These exaggerations turned real men and women into near-mythical villains, more symbols than people. Over time, the line between history and legend blurred, making it difficult to know where fact ended and storytelling began. This dramatic framing ensured that pirates remained unforgettable, even if the truth was more complicated than the tales that spread. The image of bloodthirsty villains was powerful, and it helped turn pirates into enduring figures of fear and fascination. Ballads and plays turned pirates into larger-than-life villains. Long before Hollywood, pirates had already captured the stage. Ballads were sung in taverns, celebrating or condemning famous outlaws. Traveling theater companies performed plays featuring pirates as villains, rogues, or occasionally even tragic heroes. Audiences loved these tales, which combined danger, adventure, and moral lessons. Theatrical pirates often wore exaggerated costumes, with eye patches, hooks, and flamboyant coats that later defined their image in popular culture. These performances spread pirate legends to people who had never seen the ocean, ensuring their myths lived far beyond coastal communities. The stage made pirates larger than life, transforming them from criminals into archetypes of rebellion and danger that audiences could cheer or fear in equal measure. Children read tales of pirates in cheap storybooks. By the 18th and 19th centuries, pirate tales found their way into chapbooks and penny storybooks aimed at children. These inexpensive publications simplified complex histories into adventurous yarns filled with hidden treasure, daring battles, and villainous captains. While intended as entertainment, they also shaped how new generations imagined pirates. For many children, these stories were their first introduction to history beyond their own villages. The pirate became a figure of both caution and excitement, a warning against lawlessness and a spark for dreams of adventure. Though far removed from reality, these storybooks helped embed piracy in popular imagination, ensuring that even long after the last pirate ships were gone, their legends would live on in the minds of young readers. Treasure Island shaped the modern image of piracy. In the late 19th century, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island transformed the pirate myth forever. Published in 1883, the novel introduced many of the elements now considered essential to pirate lore: the map with Annex N, the one-legged sailor with a parrot, and the idea of buried treasure. Stevenson drew on earlier stories but packaged them into a gripping adventure that captivated readers around the world. His character, Long John Silver, became the archetype of the cunning, charismatic pirate, dangerous yet strangely likable. The book's enormous success cemented these images in popular culture, influencing plays, films, and countless retellings that followed. While the real history of piracy was more complex, Treasure Island ensured that the myths would outshine the facts in the minds of generations to come. Pirates of the Caribbean turned them into Hollywood icons. Few modern films have shaped the image of pirates as much as the Pirates of the Caribbean series. Beginning in the early 2000s, these movies reimagined pirate legends with humor, fantasy, and unforgettable characters. The films drew from classic myths like cursed treasure, ghost ships, and swashbuckling battles, blending them into stories that appealed to global audiences. The character of Captain Jack Sparrow, in particular, became a cultural phenomenon, mixing charm, wit, and unpredictability. While the films were far removed from the realities of history, they revived interest in piracy for a new generation. They also reinforced the idea of pirates as both rebels and adventurers, figures caught between danger and freedom. Through these movies, pirates found a fresh place in modern mythology, cementing their role as icons of adventure on the high seas. Real pirates were far less glamorous than fiction suggests. Despite their legendary reputation, real pirates lived lives of hardship and constant danger. Ships were cramped, food was often rotten, and disease spread easily. Storms, naval hunters, and rival crews added to the constant risks. Few pirates grew rich, and even fewer retired in comfort. Most lived short, violent lives that ended in battle, prison, or execution. Yet the harsh reality did not capture imaginations as powerfully as the romantic image. Stories stripped away the misery and replaced it with daring escapes, glittering treasure, and fearless heroes. The truth is that piracy was often desperation rather than choice, survival rather than freedom. Still, this contrast between reality and legend helps explain why pirates remained so fascinating. They are remembered not for their hardships, but for the larger-than-life myths that grew from them. Maps marked with an XE are almost entirely myth. The idea of a treasure map with a big X marking the spot comes almost entirely from fiction, most famously from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. In reality, pirates rarely made maps of their loot, since most spent it quickly rather than hiding it. Even in the rare cases of buried treasure, maps were not drawn with such neat symbols. The enduring appeal of the X marks the spot myth lies in its simplicity and mystery. It suggests that treasure could be waiting anywhere, just a piece of paper away from discovery. This idea has fueled countless stories, games, and films, embedding itself so deeply in culture that it feels inseparable from piracy. But history shows it was imagination, not fact, that gave us the famous symbol of hidden riches beneath the sand. Most plunder was trade goods, not gold and silver. When pirates boarded a ship, they were far more likely to find barrels of sugar, tobacco, spices, or textiles than chests filled with gold coins. Merchant vessels carried the everyday goods that fueled international trade. These items, though less glamorous than treasure, were extremely valuable. Sugar could be sold for high profit, tobacco was in great demand, and spices fetched impressive prices in Europe. Pirates often seized these bulk goods along with weapons, tools, and even food. Gold and silver did appear, particularly from Spanish treasure fleets, but these were exceptions rather than the rule. The real wealth of piracy was in stolen trade, not glittering hoards. This practical reality reveals pirates as opportunists who cared less about legendary treasure and more about anything that could keep their ships supplied and their pockets full. Spices, sugar, and tobacco were prime pirate prizes. Among the most common spoils of piracy were goods that shaped global trade in the 17th and 18th centuries. Sugar, harvested in the Caribbean, was in huge demand across Europe. Tobacco, grown in the Americas, became another highly profitable cargo. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, and pepper carried immense value, often worth more than gold by weight. Pirates targeted ships carrying these products because they could be sold quickly in markets or traded for supplies. These items also had the advantage of being durable, able to survive long journeys at sea. The pursuit of sugar, tobacco, and spices connected piracy directly to the wider story of empire and commerce, making pirates not just thieves, but also unintentional participants in the same global networks. They attacked. Slaves were tragically part of the pirate economy. The transatlantic slave trade was one of the darkest aspects of global commerce in the age of piracy. Ships carrying enslaved Africans were frequent targets for pirate raids. Some pirates sold captured slaves for profit, participating directly in this cruel system. Others kept them as forced labor aboard their ships. This grim reality shows that piracy was not free from the injustices of its time. While pirates are often remembered for their defiance of empires, many also contributed to human suffering. The connection between piracy and slavery is an important reminder that the romance of pirate lore hides much darker truths. It was not only gold, sugar, and tobacco that fueled piracy, but also the exploitation of human lives caught in the vast machinery of empire and trade. Some pirates freed enslaved people and welcomed them into crews. Not all pirates participated in the slave trade. Some, when seizing slave ships, freed captives and offered them places in their crews. On these ships, skill and loyalty mattered more than origin or background. For those who accepted, piracy offered a chance at freedom denied elsewhere, even if it came with immense danger. This practice contributed to the diversity of pirate crews, which sometimes included men from across Africa, Europe, and the Americas working side by side. It also highlighted the contrast between the rigid hierarchies of empire and the more fluid, if perilous, world of piracy. While not universal, these moments of liberation show that pirates could sometimes disrupt the very system of oppression they also profited from. It remains one of the more complex and surprising aspects of their history. Pirate ships could outmaneuver larger naval vessels. Naval warships were powerful but often heavy and slow. Pirates, by contrast, preferred smaller, lighter ships that could dart through the waves with speed and agility. This gave them an advantage in pursuit and escape. They could approach merchant ships quickly, strike, and vanish before a naval escort could respond. In shallow waters, reefs, and island chains, their nimble vessels could navigate where larger ships risked running aground. This ability to outmaneuver their foes allowed pirates to flourish, despite being outgunned. Navies might control the open ocean, but in the twisting passages of the Caribbean or the Indian Ocean, pirate ships often held the upper hand. Their speed was their shield, their weapon, and sometimes the only reason they survived against overwhelming force. Smaller sloops were often more effective than galleons. While galleons and frigates carried heavy firepower, many pirates chose sloops, schooners, or brigantines, smaller vessels that sacrificed cannon numbers for speed and maneuverability. Sloops in particular were fast, easy to handle, and capable of sailing close to the wind, giving pirates the ability to chase or flee with equal skill. These ships could slip into shallow harbors and hidden coves, making them perfect for ambushes. Their smaller size also meant they required fewer crew members, though when packed with pirates, they could still launch devastating boarding attacks. The effectiveness of these vessels demonstrates that piracy was not about sheer power, but about cunning and mobility. Against slower, lumbering ships, a swift sloop could prove far deadlier than the mightiest galleon. Pirates relied on speed rather than size to win battles. At sea, pirates rarely sought to overpower their enemies with massive firepower. Instead, they relied on speed, agility, and the element of surprise. A fast ship could chase down merchant vessels, outpace a naval warship, or slip away before reinforcements arrived. Battles were often won not by brute force, but by clever maneuvering and quick strikes. Pirates understood that survival depended on avoiding drawn-out confrontations. A single broadside from a warship could destroy them, so their strategy focused on striking first, boarding quickly, and ending fights before their opponents had time to react. This emphasis on speed gave pirates their edge, and it explains how relatively small crews could become such a powerful threat to empires across the seas. Pirate signals included lanterns, flags, and drumbeats. Communication at sea was never simple, especially in the age before radios. Pirates relied on simple but effective signals to coordinate attacks or guide their fleets. Lanterns could be raised or lowered at night to send messages across dark waters. Flags displayed in daylight carried meanings known to the crew, while drumbeats or gunshots provided auditory signals during the chaos of battle. These methods allowed pirates to move in surprising coordination, despite the open sea separating them. A single lantern might call ships to gather, or a drumbeat could signal the moment to board. Such tools were not just practical, they also added to the drama of piracy, creating moments where sound and sight worked together to turn scattered ships into a unified, dangerous force. Some used smoke and fire as psychological weapons. Pirates understood that fear could win battles before the first sword was drawn. Some captains, like Blackbeard, lit fuses in their beards, surrounding themselves with sparks and smoke. Others set barrels ablaze or used fire arrows to create panic aboard enemy ships. Even the sight of smoke on the horizon could unsettle sailors who feared that pirates were close. Fire was dangerous to everyone on wooden ships, but as a weapon of intimidation, it was devastatingly effective. In a world where superstition was strong and the sea itself seemed haunted, pirates who wrapped themselves in flame and smoke looked like figures of nightmare. This mastery of spectacle shows that piracy was not only about brute force, it was also about controlling the imagination of their foes. Pirates studied tides, winds, and currents with great skill. Survival on the ocean demanded knowledge far beyond swordplay. Pirates, like other sailors, became masters of reading the sea itself. They understood how tides shifted, how currents flowed, and how seasonal winds could carry ships swiftly or slow them to a crawl. This knowledge allowed them to choose ambush points, escape through hidden passages, and plan raids with precision. A well-timed attack could trap a merchant vessel in unfavorable waters, while pirates sailed effortlessly on currents they knew by heart. Their skill turned the ocean into a map of opportunity, invisible to the untrained eye. This mastery of natural forces was as crucial to their success as cannons or cutlasses, for without it, they would have been lost to storms and stronger enemies. Many were expert navigators who read the stars. Long before modern technology, sailors relied on the stars to guide their voyages, and pirates were no exception. By studying constellations and using tools like the astrolabe or quadrant, they could chart courses across vast oceans. Navigators watched the North Star for direction, measured the angle of the sun, and kept detailed logs of distance traveled. Pirates often recruited skilled navigators, sometimes forcing captured sailors to serve in this role. These individuals were highly valued, for their knowledge could mean the difference between treasure and shipwreck. The ability to read the night sky connected pirates to the same traditions as explorers and merchants, reminding us that behind the chaos of raids was a deep reliance on careful science and skill. Pirates often struck where shipping lanes were busiest. Pirates did not wander aimlessly across the seas. They understood the patterns of global trade and positioned themselves along the busiest routes. Narrow straits, coastal passages, and well-traveled crossings offered endless opportunities to intercept merchant vessels. Ships loaded with sugar, silver, tobacco, and spices had predictable paths, and pirates lay in wait where traffic was heaviest. In many ways, piracy mirrored highway robbery on land, targeting choke points where prey could not easily escape. This strategic choice amplified their impact, forcing empires to protect trade routes at great cost. By striking at the lifelines of commerce, pirates ensured their actions were felt far beyond the decks of captured ships. They threatened entire economies with each raid. Some targeted treasure fleets crossing the Atlantic. Perhaps the richest prizes of all were the Spanish treasure fleets that crossed the Atlantic carrying silver and gold from the Americas to Europe. These convoys sailed once or twice a year, heavily guarded but enormously valuable. Pirates dreamed of intercepting them, and some succeeded. The capture of even a single galleon could provide wealth beyond imagination. These fleets were symbols of imperial power, and attacking them was both daring and dangerous. Few pirates had the strength to take on such targets, but those who did etched their names in history. The lure of treasure fleets helped fuel the legends of vast hoards and unimaginable riches, even if most pirates never came close to such bounty. Others raided ports in daring coastal attacks. While many pirate raids took place at sea, some captains dared to attack ports directly. These assaults were bold, striking at warehouses, homes, and ships docked in harbors. Quick raids could yield supplies, wealth, or even hostages for ransom. They also spread fear far inland, reminding towns that piracy was not confined to distant waters. Such attacks required careful planning, for a port could quickly rally defenders. But when successful, they produced legendary stories. Coastal raids were part of the pirates' unpredictable strategy. They could appear anywhere, from quiet villages to bustling colonial cities. The threat of a sudden strike kept communities on edge, and their daring nature added to the enduring drama of piracy. Pirates sometimes operated in the Indian Ocean. Although the Caribbean dominates pirate lore, the Indian Ocean was another hotspot for piracy. Its waters were busy with trade between Africa, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. Ships carried spices, textiles, and treasures that made tempting targets. Pirates established bases on islands like Madagascar, which offered shelter and supplies. Some crews even crossed from the Caribbean to these distant waters, chasing the wealth of the East. The vastness of the Indian Ocean gave them both opportunity and anonymity, as navies found it difficult to patrol such a wide region. Here, pirates became part of a global network, tying their stories not only to the Americas and Europe, but also to Asia and Africa. The Red Sea became a hunting ground for pirates. The Red Sea, linking the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean through Egypt, was another key region for piracy. Trade caravans brought spices, silk, and gold from the east, which were then shipped northward. Pirates lay in wait along these routes, striking vessels rich with goods. European outlaws also ventured into the Red Sea, targeting Muslim traders and rival empires. The combination of valuable cargo and narrow passages made it a perfect environment for ambushes. For a time, the Red Sea was considered one of the most dangerous waters in the world. Its role in global trade ensured that piracy here had consequences far beyond the region, influencing markets and politics across continents. The Straits of Malacca were notorious for piracy. The Straits of Malacca, between present-day Malaysia and Indonesia, have long been one of the busiest maritime passages in the world. For centuries, pirates prowled these waters, exploiting the narrow channel where ships were forced to pass. With dense jungles, hidden coves, and countless islands, the straits provided perfect hiding places for raiders. Merchants feared the region, knowing that pirates could appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly. Unlike the brief Golden Age in the Caribbean, piracy in the Straits of Malacca persisted for centuries, becoming woven into the region's history. Even today, the straits remain important to global shipping, and their long reputation for piracy reminds us how geography can shape the opportunities for outlaws at sea. North African corsairs enslaved captives across the Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean, piracy took a different but equally feared form. North African corsairs, often called Barbary pirates, raided European coasts and seized ships for centuries. Their targets were not just goods, but also people. Captors were enslaved and taken to markets in cities like Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. Coastal towns in Spain, Italy, and even as far north as England lived in fear of sudden raids. For European powers, the corsairs were both a menace and a political challenge, since many operated under the authority of North African rulers. The legacy of these raids shaped international relations for generations. They remind us that piracy was not only about treasure and plunder, but also about the darker trade of human lives across seas that connected continents and cultures. Some European states secretly supported corsair raids. Although corsairs were condemned in public, behind the scenes, some European powers struck deals with them. Nations at war with rivals sometimes found it useful to encourage raids on enemy ships. By turning a blind eye or even paying tribute, they ensured their own vessels were spared while their enemies suffered losses. This shadowy diplomacy blurred the line between piracy and politics, making corsairs both outlaws and pawns of greater struggles. In this way, piracy in the Mediterranean was not merely lawless chaos. It was woven into the strategies of empires. The secret support given to corsairs shows how piracy often thrived not only through defiance of authority, but also through the quiet cooperation of those in power. The Barbary coast became synonymous with piracy. For centuries, the stretch of North Africa known as the Barbary Coast was infamous as a center of piracy. From its harbors sailed corsairs who raided across the Mediterranean and beyond, striking fear into European seafarers. The region's cities thrived on this trade, with rulers taxing or sharing in the profits of piracy. Captives and goods flowed through their markets, creating a system that endured despite countless attempts to stamp it out. The very name Barbary became shorthand for danger at sea, a reminder that piracy could flourish openly under the protection of powerful states. The Barbary coast remained a symbol of piracy long after the Golden Age in the Caribbean had ended, cementing its reputation in the annals of maritime history. Pirates once reached as far as Iceland and Ireland. Though piracy is most often associated with warm waters, raids sometimes reached surprisingly far north. In the 17th century, corsairs from North Africa attacked villages in Ireland and even Iceland, carrying off hundreds of captives. These raids shocked Europe, demonstrating that no coastline was truly safe. Remote communities, far from naval protection, proved vulnerable to sudden assaults. The victims were taken across thousands of miles to be sold in distant slave markets, their fates intertwined with the global reach of piracy. These events, though less well known, showed just how far pirate influence could spread. Even the cold, stormy seas of the North Atlantic were not beyond the reach of daring raiders from distant shores. Japanese wako pirates raided the Asian coasts for centuries. In East Asia, piracy had its own long tradition. Japanese pirates, known as wako, terrorized the coasts of China, Korea, and Japan from the 14th century onward. Their fleets raided villages, seized ships, and disrupted trade routes. The wako were not always purely Japanese. Their ranks included Chinese and Korean sailors as well. Over the centuries, they became a persistent force, sometimes numbering in the thousands. Governments struggled to suppress them, and coastal communities lived with the constant threat of attack. The story of the wako shows that piracy was not confined to Europe and the Caribbean, but was a global phenomenon, shaped by the unique geography and politics of each region. Their centuries-long activity left a lasting mark on the history of East Asia. Chinese pirates commanded fleets larger than many navies. China's coasts were once home to pirate forces so vast they dwarfed the navies sent to stop them. In the 17th and 18th centuries, some pirate leaders commanded fleets of hundreds of ships, ranging from small junks to large war vessels. These armadas operated almost like floating kingdoms, raiding villages, taxing merchants, and even controlling stretches of coastline. The size of these fleets reveals how piracy could rise to the scale of organized power, challenging imperial rule itself. The Chinese government fought long, difficult campaigns to suppress them, but the sheer numbers of ships and men made the task nearly impossible. These massive pirate forces remind us that piracy was not always small-scale crime at times. It reached the level of naval warfare. Yi Sao led one of the greatest pirate armadas in history. Among the most remarkable pirate leaders was Yi Sao, a woman who commanded one of the largest pirate confederations ever assembled. In the early 19th century, she inherited her husband's fleet and expanded it into a vast organization stretching across the South China Sea. Her leadership was strict and disciplined, with clear codes of conduct that maintained order among tens of thousands of men. She proved a shrewd strategist, negotiating with governments and crushing rivals. Yi Sao's fleet was so powerful that even imperial forces struggled to defeat her. Instead, she eventually secured favorable terms of surrender and retired peacefully, an extraordinary ending in pirate history. Her story stands as one of the most impressive examples of leadership on the high seas. Her fleet included tens of thousands of men and hundreds of ships. The sheer scale of Yi Sao's power is almost hard to imagine. At its height, her fleet is believed to have included more than 300 ships and upwards of 30,000 men. This made her confederation larger than many official navies of the time. With such numbers, she could blockade ports, control trade, and dominate entire regions. Her influence stretched across the South China Sea, where merchants and officials alike were forced to reckon with her authority. Unlike the smaller pirate crews of the Caribbean, Yi Sao's fleet resembled a floating empire. The fact that she, a woman in a rigidly patriarchal society, commanded such a force only adds to the astonishing nature of her legacy in maritime history. Pirate empires once rivaled kingdoms in power. Though pirates are often remembered as scattered bands of rogues, at times their power grew to rival that of nations. In the Caribbean, fleets disrupted trade so completely that empires were forced to divert resources to defend their colonies. In Asia, leaders like Yi Sao built pirate confederations so large they effectively governed stretches of coast. These pirate realms imposed their own rules, collected their own wealth, and operated with a degree of organization that surprised their enemies. For brief moments, pirates became more than outlaws. They became alternative powers, challenging the authority of kings and emperors. While their empires eventually collapsed, their scale and audacity left a mark on history, showing how even rebels on the sea could rise to rival the might of nations. Some pirates retired quietly into wealth and obscurity. Though many pirates met violent ends, a few managed to escape the cycle of battle and pursuit. Some accepted royal pardons, surrendered their ships, and lived quietly in coastal towns. Others retired with enough wealth to live comfortably, blending back into society. Their names often faded from memory, unlike their more dramatic peers who died in battle. These hidden retirements show another side of piracy. Not every story ended with capture or execution. A lucky few found a way to step back from the black flag and slip into anonymity. History remembers the boldest figures, but in truth, some pirates may have lived out their final years as ordinary citizens, their past adventures known only to themselves. Others were betrayed by their own crews. For all the loyalty and brotherhood spoken of in pirate lore, betrayal was never far away. Some captains were handed over to authorities by their own men, either in exchange for pardons or out of fear of punishment. In the tense world of piracy, trust was fragile, and a crew's mood could shift quickly. Promises of gold or freedom tempted men to turn against leaders they once followed. These betrayals often marked the end of notorious careers, with captured captains tried and executed while their crews dispersed. Such stories reveal the unstable foundations of pirate life, where survival often outweighed loyalty. Even among rebels bound by shared danger, betrayal could prove more deadly than any naval cannon. A few pirates even returned to service under kings. Though pirates were enemies of empires, some eventually returned to serve the very rulers they had once defied. Pardoned captains sometimes became privateers, raiding enemy ships with official approval. Others offered their naval skills to governments in need of experienced sailors. These transformations were pragmatic. Kings valued seafaring expertise, and former pirates sought safety from execution. Such reversals highlight the blurred line between outlaw and servant of the crown. The same man could be a pirate one year and a naval officer the next, depending on circumstance. For those who made the transition, it was a chance to survive, even if it meant trading rebellion for obedience once again. Pirate myths mixed fact and fiction almost immediately. From the moment their stories spread, pirates became larger than life. Pamphlets, newspapers, and ballads exaggerated their deeds, blending truth with rumor. The real hardships of hunger, disease, and fear were often forgotten in favor of tales of treasure, daring escapes, and monstrous cruelty. Even in their own lifetimes, pirates were becoming myth. This fusion of fact and fiction made it difficult for later generations to separate history from legend. The blurred line is part of what keeps pirates so fascinating today. They were real people whose lives quickly became stories, transformed into symbols of both danger and freedom in the imagination of the world. Ghost stories of pirate ships haunted sailors for generations. Long after the last pirate havens were destroyed, sailors whispered tales of ghostly ships still prowling the seas. Phantom galleons with tattered black sails were said to appear in storms, vanishing before dawn. Some believed the spirits of pirates who died in battle continued to sail in the afterlife, doomed to wander forever. These ghost stories gave shape to the fears of sailors facing the endless unknown of the ocean. They also kept alive the memory of pirates long after their reign had ended. Whether true or not, the haunted image of spectral ships reinforced the idea that piracy had left an indelible mark, one that lingered in the imagination like a shadow across the waves. Some believed pirate treasure was cursed. Stories often warned that ill-gotten wealth carried a curse. Gold stolen by bloodshed or betrayal was said to bring misfortune to those who held it. Sailors told of coins that brought sickness, jewels that disappeared, and fortunes that doomed their owners. While these tales were likely inventions, they reflected a moral undercurrent, that piracy, though tempting, came with a price. The myth of cursed treasure grew alongside the idea of buried hoards, adding mystery and danger to the promise of riches. Today, the notion of cursed gold remains a staple of pirate fiction, reminding us how fear and morality combined to shape the stories told about those who lived by plunder. Legends of hidden gold inspired countless treasure hunts. Though buried treasure was rare in reality, the idea inspired endless searches. From deserted islands in the Caribbean to rocky coves along distant coasts, generations of treasure hunters scoured the earth for chests of gold. Maps, riddles, and rumors fueled expeditions, some of which became adventures as dramatic as the myths themselves. Most found nothing, yet the hope of discovery persisted. The very possibility that a fortune might still lie beneath the sand kept imaginations alive. These quests were not just about wealth. They were about the thrill of uncovering a secret, of stepping into the footsteps of long-dead pirates. The dream of hidden gold ensured that the legends of piracy never faded entirely into history. Pirate folklore still stirs imaginations today. Centuries after the last great age of piracy ended, their stories remain alive in folklore. Festivals celebrate them, novels reimagine them, and films continue to cast them as figures of adventure. The image of the pirate, bold, rebellious, and free, continues to inspire. Children dress as them for play, and adults find in them symbols of independence and defiance. The endurance of pirate folklore shows how myths can outlive their realities, taking on new meanings for each generation. Though the seas have long been patrolled by modern navies, in imagination they are still haunted by black sails and hidden treasure. Historians continue to debate how pirates shaped the modern world. Beyond their legends, pirates had real impacts on history. Some scholars argue that their experiments with democracy, equality, and shared power influenced later ideas about governance. Others see them primarily as destructive forces who disrupted trade and spread fear. Their role in global commerce, slavery, and naval warfare remains a subject of study, reminding us that piracy was both romanticized and brutal. By challenging empires, they exposed vulnerabilities in the great powers of their time. Whether remembered as villains or rebels, pirates left behind questions that historians are still trying to answer. Their true place in history may never be fully agreed upon, which only adds to their enduring fascination. The age of pirates was brief, but their legacy endures. The so-called Golden Age of Piracy lasted only a few decades, yet it left an outsized mark on culture and history. In that short time, pirates became symbols of freedom and defiance, even as they were hunted down and destroyed. Their ships no longer sail, but their image has traveled further than they ever dreamed, reaching across centuries into stories, songs, and films. The brevity of their reign contrasts with the longevity of their legacy, proving that history is not measured only in years, but also in the power of memory. The age was brief, but the echo of piracy continues to resound. Pirates remind us that freedom and lawlessness once ruled the seas. At their core, pirates embodied both sides of human longing, the desire for freedom and the danger of lawlessness. They lived outside the rules of nations, creating societies that were both democratic and ruthless. They offered an alternative to the rigid order of empires, but at great cost in blood and suffering. Pirates remind us that history is shaped not only by kings and conquerors, but also by rebels who defied them. On the open seas, far from the reach of law, freedom and chaos once sailed under the same flag. That legacy continues to fascinate us, a reminder of the wild possibilities that once ruled the waves. And so our voyage draws to a close. We have wandered through the world of pirates, from the black flags of the Caribbean to the crowded ports of Asia, from the daring raids of Blackbeard to the vast armadas commanded by Yi Sao. Along the way, we discovered how myth and history entwined. The ghostly tales, the treasure maps, the sea shanties, and the legends that still echo in stories today. The Golden Age of Piracy may have been brief, but its legacy is anything but small. For centuries, these outlaws of the sea have lingered in our imagination, not only as villains, but as symbols of defiance, freedom, and the wild unpredictability of life beyond the reach of kings. The true history of piracy is harsher, less glamorous, and far more complex than the stories suggest. Yet perhaps it is this very mix of truth and legend that makes them so enduring. As you drift now toward rest, imagine the quiet of the ocean at night. The sails furled, the waves calm, the stars wheeling overhead just as pirates once saw them. The sea holds both mystery and memory, carrying with it the whispers of those who lived and died upon its surface. Pirates may be long gone, but the rhythm of the tide, the pull of the horizon, and the call of adventure remain timeless. If you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to the Sleepy History channel. A like or a comment lets us know you'd like more voyages into the past. But for now, you can simply let the stories fade, like lanterns dimming on a quiet deck. Close your eyes and let the waves carry you gently. The ocean has always been a place of dreams, sometimes wild, sometimes dark, always endless. Tonight, it carries you not into danger, but into peace. Rest now, knowing that the world of pirates has passed into legend, yet continues to sail quietly through our imaginations. And when you're ready, the next video will be waiting. Another story, another journey, another chance to drift away into the currents of history. Good night.